Most of the time when you're by yourself, for me, on the back of a horse, I mean, like my biggest priorities were the animal, myself, trying not to die.
When Matt and Smokey left Alan's ranch in Duckwater under the encouragement of a long gun, they were less clear on where the trail was than Matt would prefer. In the vast, under-labeled sections of Nevada, Matt had learned to move from rancher to rancher, like points on a map. They would tell him where water was, where the next town was, where he could find friendly people, and where he could find the trail. But not Alan. Back in Duckwater, at Alan's ranch, Matt had made a final plea for help. He was ultimately headed for Baker, Nevada, at the border of Utah. But it was 100 miles away.
I put my maps on his hood, and he was like, you stay right there. Don't get near me, you stay right there. And I just was like, look, I know we're here. I'm trying to get, I think the next town I was trying to get to was Preston. And he said, you're right there. Preston's right there. Now get the hell out of here. Get off my property.
This is Rite of Passage. I'm Laura Weber Davis. Chapter 6, Escape. We join Matt and Smokey in medias res, in the middle of things, as they head into a small mountain range east of Duckwater. He was a week away from the border of Utah. It was nearing August.
I was heading toward Preston, and I got very lost. I started following what I thought was the trail, and it was a 2-track that headed east-northeast into the mountains. And then eventually the 2-track turned into a trail, and then the trail basically turned into a game trail. As I kept getting steeper and steeper into the mountains, I lost the trail completely.
Sagebrush and scrub oak obscured the path that Matt thought he was on. And then there was nothing. Even the game trail was gone.
And I remember crawling on my hands and knees on the ground because I would see these stumps. Way back in the day, the Forest Service would have cleared the land for grazing rights, and they would cut down trees and turn them into fence posts and things like that. And I kept thinking, well, if these are stumps and they're ancient, I mean, they were cut 100 years ago. Somebody has been here before. There must have been a reason why there was somebody here.
But that's as good as it got. The presence of humans 100 years ago.
And I kept going up and up and up and up, and eventually I got to like a boulder fall where I was terrified. I said, "Oh God." Smokey and I sort of picked our way over these boulders, and he was not happy about it. I mean, I was walking and crawling and dragging him during this period of time just to get him to step over these big boulders and everything else. I mean, he was high-siding his belly onto these rocks.
Yes, difficult.
It was very difficult, very hot, and at the time it was, kind of scary because I didn't know if I was going to get to some point where I knew I couldn't make it, and then I'd have to go all the way back down.
Yeah.
And that was what terrified me the most, because I was like, I was thinking to myself, I don't know if I really have it in me.
Never mind, he was out of energy and water. Where would he go back to? Alan's ranch?
And eventually I sort of picked my way around this huge boulder that had sort of fallen down in the pass, and I was able to sort of get around it, and there were a bunch of scrub oaks and things like that. And I finally kind of burst through this thicket. And when I pulled Smokey through there, I remember looking at this beautiful pasture. Just the grass was very, very short. But there was a little creek that was running through there, and there were butterflies, flittering around in the air. And there was a Mustang that was off in the distance, all by itself. And I just remember leaping and crying with joy. I was so ecstatic. It was one of the most triumphant moments of my life. Still is. That I wasn't going to die. I knew it. I was like, there's water, there's something for Smokey to eat. Like, we're going to be fine. You know, like, we're going to be fine.
This rapturous feeling, this euphoria, was one that Matt would never forget. He was alive. Having traveled through hundreds of miles of barren land, having left some of the warmest people he'd ever met, only to be threatened by one so scorched by this desert that he would deny a young man water, and having lost the trail on an arid mountain pass, searching for human presence among stumps on the ground, he was alive. The vastness of the treeless expanse on the trail ahead of him never looked so good. Matt and Smokey rested the night in the butterfly meadow and turned their gaze to one of our least visited federal lands, a stargazer's paradise of dark sky, clean air, and crystalline reservoirs, Great Basin National Park. On the western edge of the park, 3 roads converged. There was an outpost there with a bar and a couple rooms for rent. But that's it. No gas, no motel. Just this place. And it's not particularly easy to find on a map.
You're going to see an area where
3
roads.
Major station bar.
That's it. Major station.
Major station. Oh, it's got like a bunch of antlers.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
It's kind of awesome.
Yes.
Oh, the whole ceiling is antlers.
Yes. So I got to Major Station. They had 2 rooms you could rent, and they had a paddock in the back with like a little lean-to, and they would sell me flakes of hay. And I was the only person there for the entire time I was there. No one ever stopped. Nobody ever pulled in or visited. There was nobody there but me. And that place was crazy. There was an owner whom I never met. I can't remember what he was doing, but he wasn't there. He found instead a couple who told him that they were left in charge of Major's Station by the owner. And I rented a room. They had a nice little room, like in the, like you right off of the bar was a hallway, and it had a bathroom with a shower in it, and there were 2 bedrooms that you could rent. And I rented one, and there was a paddock out back. When I got there, they insisted on me handing my gun over to the bar, which is actually very common. Like, it's not uncommon. And to the point where if I walked into a bar, I knew in many instances to like take my gun belt off, and you would hand your gun to the bartender. And it's like right out of a Clint Eastwood, movie.
Sure.
It's like they're basically like,
guns at the door.
Yeah, leave your guns at the door. And so I would take my gun belt off, and I would, sort of wrap it up, and I would give it to him. But something about Major's Station felt off. As the day would go on, they would drink and drink and drink to the point where they would start to fight with one another. And they were very suspicious people. But as time went on, they just got more and more volatile, and they were gouging me for like every dollar and cent. It was something like $5 per flake of alfalfa in 2003. A flake of hay, it's like a sandwich to a horse, a big snack or a small meal. It's hard to price a flake of hay, but by today's pricing standards, a flake might cost about $1 or less. They were charging him $5, and Smokey would need a few flakes to refuel. And I just was, I didn't have a lot of money. I was just like, but I had nowhere else to go. It was like the heat of the day. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get to Baker. I'd already plotted out where I was going to get to. And they, for everything, I mean, it's like they charged me for water. I didn't really trust them. I mean, I would sit in my hotel, in the room, which was like a little twin bed. I remember it had like a white sort of like ruffly bedspread. And I would just sit there, like just sort of dozing, trying, in the heat of the day. And the woman would, she would always sort of open the door, and then I would see her feet under the door, and you could just tell that she was just sort of listening, and then she would like go back in the bar.
The day wore on, and Matt found himself looking forward to getting back on the trail. He went to check on Smokey, make sure he was okay.
In the evening time, I'd walked up, and they had padlocked the paddock, so I couldn't even get my horse out.
Oh, that's awful.
It's like padlocking your car. They put the boot on the car, and I was like, what is going on? And I came in and I confronted them. They were like, not until you're paid and settle up. I was like, I already paid you for the room, and they're like, yeah, but there's there could be incidentals, like we'll unlock it in the morning. And I was just like, to hell, hell you will. Like I was pretty pissed off, and I was like, okay, well then give me my gun back. I'm going to leave before you guys wake up. And they're like, no, you can't have your gun. And I was like, wait, so you got my horse locked up and you got my gun? I was like, hell with you people. I'm going to bed.
But he wasn't going to sleep. He was formulating a plan. The couple had been drinking heavily on the owner's tab, whether he knew it or not. And Matt knew they'd be passed out by the time they were done in the pre-dawn hours.
I didn't want to wake them up by opening the door, and they would lock the door to the point where I couldn't get out. I remember I opened my window, and I went out the window, and I walked around the building there was a window next to the bar. And I jimmied that window open, and I went into the bar, and I got my gun, which was like sitting, like underneath the bar someplace. Got my gun, came back around, shot the lock.
You did?
Oh, hell yeah. Like I was in no mood. Shot the lock and just grabbed Smokey and frickin' rode out of there. And I was the only problem.
Were you afraid of a ricochet or anything like that?
No. At that particular time, no.
It would be the only time Matt would use his single-action revolver in anger. The blast didn't wake the couple out of the fog of over-imbibing, but it was important for Matt not to stick around and find out.
The reason I was concerned at all is when I got out on the road, I knew where I needed to head, and the trail that I ended up taking, if you see the horseshoe bend of Route 50 that goes around Mount Wheeler, I kept going basically straight into the mountains. But I knew that if they woke up and they wanted to come after me, I was going to be pretty easy to find because it's a straight road that you can see down for like 15 miles. I knew that I wanted to like try and get out of there as fast as I could and make as much, distance as I could, which I did. I think I got to... I got to the turnoff dirt road that kept going straight into the hills probably by 9 in the morning, so it's still pretty early at that point.
At any point were you thinking, like, I should have never left Hot Creek?
Oh, sure.
Like, I just left paradise.
Oh, sure.
But the thing was, Matt knew no matter what paradise he found, there would be trials. And no matter what cruelty he faced, a kindness would later greet him. The ebb and flow of these two things was Matt's constant companion. They accompanied him across the long, straight road away from Major's Station, around the bend of Mount Wheeler in the beautiful Great Basin National Park, and to the sanctuary that awaited him at the border in Baker, Nevada. A ranch family there would put him up for 2 weeks and teach him about roping and driving livestock. They'd feed Matt and Smokey. Flakes of hay at the price of helping around the ranch. But this was yet another paradise, followed by another tribulation.
After I left Baker and I was going across the Wawa Desert on my way toward Crystal Peak, it was like open salt flats, like blinding, no shade.
Yeah.
There was your archetypal salt flat, like crossing a salt flat with a black horse. It was rough. And I was really thinking, like, you are a stupid man, Matt. You really put your foot in it this time. But the point is that happened all the time. You'd have little setbacks and you'd think about packing it in. The problem is that it's 9 times out of 10, it's just as easy to keep going east as it is to turn around and go back where you came from with your tail between your legs. And by the time you get to where you're going, you'd be surprised what God puts in your lap. You meet some amazing people, you get some rest, you get some food in your stomach, and the horse is happy or something like that. I mean, all it takes is just a little bit of a little respite, like a little bit of civility or camaraderie amongst people you meet.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, and then you find that you're the well that you can draw from to make it through the next day is that much fuller.
On the next rite of passage, the cost of the long trail begins to add up.
And it still did long-term damage to my eyes. I mean, even now I have these funny little puckers on the inside of the whites of my eyes near the bridge of my nose that were as a direct result of UV damage.
That's next time on Rite of Passage. I'm Laura Weber Davis. Special thanks to podcast editor Rachel Ishikawa. The Rite of Passage theme was written and recorded by Bob Scon. Thanks for listening.